Emma Whitmore dropped to her knees in the mud outside the county courthouse, clutching a foreclosure notice so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her father was dying. The ranch was gone, and the only man willing to marry her was a stranger who owned nothing but a tired horse and a pair of worn-out boots. She said yes. She didn't love him. She didn't even know him. But what Emma didn't know, what nobody in that dusty little town knew, was that the quiet mountain cowboy she just agreed to marry was hiding a secret worth more than every ranch in the territory combined. If you want to hear how this story ends, subscribe to the channel right now and follow Emma's journey all the way to the final chapter. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Emma Whitmore had not slept in 4 days. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago. Across from her, a stack of envelopes sat unopened. She didn't need to open them. She already knew what they said. Past due. Final notice. Pay immediately, or face legal action. Her younger sister Clara stood in the doorway watching her. "You haven't eaten," Clara said. "I'm not hungry." "Emma, you haven't eaten since Tuesday." Emma didn't look up. "I said I'm not hungry, Clara." Clara walked over and sat down beside her. She was 17, still soft in the face, still young enough to believe that things would somehow work out. Emma envied that. She envied it so deeply it made her chest ache. "What are we going to do?" Clara whispered. Emma didn't answer. Because the truth was, she had no idea. And for the first time in her 24 years of life, she had absolutely no plan. Their father, Henry Whitmore, had built this ranch with his bare hands over 30 years ago. He had cleared the land himself, raised cattle, broken horses, survived droughts and blizzards and everything the mountains could throw at a man. He was the toughest person Emma had ever known. And now he was upstairs in bed, too weak to stand, coughing blood into a handkerchief every morning and asking Emma every single day if the bills were paid. She lied to him every single day. "The bills are fine, Daddy. Don't you worry about a thing." But the bills were not fine. The bills were a disaster. The ranch had been losing money for 3 years. Bad seasons. Sick cattle. A broken well that cost more to fix than it was worth. And then Henry got sick, really sick, and the medical bills started piling up like snow in January. Emma had sold everything she could sell. The good horses went first. Then the equipment. Then her mother's jewelry, the only thing Emma had left of the woman who died bringing Clara into the world. She sold it all. And it still wasn't enough. The bank sent a man named Fletcher Grimes to deliver the final notice. He showed up on a Wednesday morning wearing a suit that cost more than Emma made in a year, and he stood in her doorway with a smile that made her skin crawl. "Miss Whitmore," he said, tipping his hat like he was doing her a favor. "I'm afraid the bank has exhausted its patience." "I asked for an extension," Emma said, keeping her voice steady. "I sent a letter 3 weeks ago." "Yes, and the bank reviewed your request." He paused. "It was denied." Emma felt her stomach drop. "Mr. Grimes, my father is sick. He built this ranch from nothing. You can't just—" "I understand your situation, Miss Whitmore. Truly I do." He didn't understand anything. She could see it in his eyes. "But the bank has a responsibility to its investors. You owe $1,100 in back payments. If the balance is not settled within 30 days, the property will be seized and sold at auction." $1,100. She might as well have owed $11 million. "There has to be something," Emma said. "Some arrangement, some—" "There is no arrangement, Miss Whitmore." Fletcher Grimes put his hat back on and turned to leave. Then he stopped. He looked back over his shoulder with that same awful smile. "Of course, a woman in your position does have certain options. A good marriage, for instance. There are men in this town who could settle that debt before breakfast." He left. Emma stood in the doorway for a long time after he was gone. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. A good marriage. That's what her life had come down to. Sell herself to save her family. She walked back inside. I'd sat down at the table and stared at those envelopes until her vision blurred. That night, she heard her father coughing upstairs. deep rattling coughs that shook the walls. She pressed her face into her pillow and cried without making a sound, because Clara was asleep in the next room, and Emma would rather die than let her sister see her fall apart. The next morning, Emma went into town. She told herself she was going to the general store for supplies. That was the lie she rehearsed on the walk-in. But the truth was, she had no money for supplies. The truth was, she was walking into town because she didn't know what else to do. And sitting in that kitchen staring at those envelopes was going to kill her faster than any disease. She walked past the feed store, past the blacksmith, past the church where her parents got married 26 years ago. And then she heard the laughter. 3 women were standing outside the dressmaker's shop. Margaret Holloway, Ruth Dawson, and Patricia Banks, the wife of the man who owned the bank that was about to take Emma's home. They saw her coming. "Well, if it isn't Emma Whitmore," Margaret said, loud enough for everyone on the street to hear. "Still wearing last year's dress, I see." Ruth laughed. Patricia just smiled the way a cat smiles at a mouse. Emma kept walking. "How's your father, Emma?" Patricia called out. "I heard he's not doing well. Such a shame. Thomas says the ranch is in terrible shape. He says it's barely worth the land it sits on." Emma stopped. Every muscle in her body told her to keep walking. But something inside her, something hot and sharp and dangerous, made her turn around. "Your husband," Emma said quietly, "sent a man to my door yesterday to threaten my dying father with eviction. So you'll forgive me, Patricia, if I'm not in the mood for small talk." Patricia's smile vanished. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." Margaret gasped. Ruth looked away. Patricia's face turned red, but she recovered quickly. "My husband is running a business, Emma. It's not personal. It's personal to me." Emma turned and walked away before she said something she couldn't take back. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it felt different. This time the rage had a direction. She needed a plan. She needed a miracle. What she got was Caleb Hayes. She first saw him at the water trough outside the general store that morning. He was a tall man, lean, quiet in a way that most men in town were not. He wore a hat that had seen too many seasons, a coat with patches on both elbows, and boots that were held together more by habit than leather. He was watering an old horse, a mare with a gray coat and tired eyes, and he was speaking to the animal softly, the way you'd speak to a friend who'd had a long day. Emma didn't pay him much attention at first. She had bigger problems than a stranger talking to his horse. But then she walked inside the store, and she heard the owner, Bill Tucker, talking to his wife behind the counter. "That's the Hayes fellow. Lives up in the mountains somewhere. Comes down every few months for supplies. Strange one. Quiet. Keeps to himself." "Is he dangerous?" Mrs. Tucker asked. "Nah, just odd. Never causes trouble. Pays in cash. Doesn't talk much." Emma filed it away and forgot about it. She bought what little she could afford. Flour salt, a tin of coffee, and walked back outside. Caleb Hayes was still there. He was adjusting the saddle on his mare, his back to her. She walked past him without a word. And then she heard his voice. "Ma'am?" She turned. He was looking at her. His eyes were steady and calm, but there was something behind them. Something she couldn't read. "You dropped this." He held out a folded piece of paper. Emma's heart seized. It was the foreclosure notice. It must have slipped out of her coat pocket. She snatched it from his hand so fast it startled them both. "Thank you," she said, her voice tight. He nodded. "Tough times." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Like he already knew. "I'm fine," Emma said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded again, tipped his hat, and turned back to his horse. That was their first conversation. 11 words total. And somehow those 11 words would change the entire course of her life. 3 days later, Emma's world collapsed. She came home from town to find Clara standing in the yard crying. Inside, 2 men from the bank were nailing a notice to the front door. 30 days, one of them said without looking at her. After that, it's out of your hands. Emma pushed past them and went straight upstairs. Her father was sitting up in bed, his face gray, his hands trembling. Emma, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. I heard them downstairs. What's happening? She knelt beside his bed and took his hand. It was so thin. When did his hands get so thin? Nothing, Daddy. Just some paperwork. I'm handling it. Don't lie to me, girl. His eyes were wet. I didn't raise you to lie. Emma's throat closed. We owe the bank $1,100. I don't have it. I've sold everything I can sell. They're going to take the ranch. Henry Whitmore closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. This is my fault, he said. Don't say that. I should have done better. I should have planned better. Your mother, God rest her soul, she always said I was too proud to ask for help. Daddy, stop. What happens to Clara? If they take the house, where does Clara go? That question hit Emma like a bullet, because she didn't have an answer. I'll figure it out, she said. I promise. But promises don't pay debts, and hope doesn't stop a foreclosure. That night, Emma sat on the porch alone, watching the stars, and she let herself think the one thought she had been fighting for weeks. Maybe there was no way out. Maybe this was how it ended. And then she heard hooves on the road. It was late past 10 o'clock, and nobody traveled the mountain road at night. Nobody with any sense, anyway. She stood up and squinted into the darkness. A horse appeared, an old gray mare with tired eyes, and on its back, the quiet man from town, Caleb Hayes. He stopped at the edge of the yard. He didn't dismount. He just sat there in the moonlight looking at her. Miss Whitmore, he said. Mr. Hayes, it's late. I know. I apologize. What do you want? He was quiet for the long moment. Then he said something that Emma would replay in her mind for the rest of her life. I heard about your situation, the ranch, your father, the debt. Emma stiffened. That's none of your business. You're right, it's not. He paused. But I have a proposition for you, and I think you ought to hear it before you decide to be angry about it. Emma crossed her arms. I'm listening. I need a wife. Silence. The crickets stopped. The wind stopped. The whole world stopped. Excuse me, Emma said. I need a wife, Caleb repeated as calmly as if he were ordering a cup of coffee. And you need someone to pay off your father's debt and save your family's home. Are you out of your mind? Probably. You don't know me. I know enough. You know nothing about me, Mr. Hayes, nothing. He tilted his head slightly. I know you walked into town 3 days ago with holes in your boots and your head held high. I know you stood up to Patricia Banks on the street when every other woman in that town is afraid to look her in the eye. I know you've been carrying your family on your back for months, maybe years, and you haven't broken yet. Emma's breath caught. That's what I know about you, Miss Whitmore, and that's enough. She stared at him. Her mind was racing. Every rational thought she had was screaming at her to say no. This was insane. This was desperate. This was the kind of thing that happened in penny novels, not in real life. What do you get out of this? She asked. A partner. Someone I can trust. You can't trust me. You don't know me. I trust what I've seen. And what have you seen? A woman with holes in her boots. A woman who didn't give up. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Emma uncrossed her arms. Her hands were shaking again, but this time she couldn't tell if it was rage or something else. If I said yes, and I'm not saying yes, what would the arrangement be? I'll pay your father's debt, all of it. I'll make sure your sister is taken care of. You come live with me in the mountains. We build a life. That's it. That's it. Emma almost laughed. You make it sound simple. It is simple. It's just not easy. She looked at him for a long time. The moonlight carved shadows across his face. He wasn't handsome in the way the men in town were polished soft bread for comfort. He was rough, weathered, real. I need to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need. He gathered his reins. But Miss Whitmore, time is the one thing you don't have much of. He turned his horse and disappeared into the darkness. Emma stood on that porch until dawn. Joel. She told no one about the proposal. For 2 days, she carried it inside her like a stone, turning it over and over, examining every angle, searching for the trap. Because there had to be a trap. Nobody gives away $1,100 for nothing. Nobody marries a stranger out of charity. She went through every possibility. How was a criminal running from the law and needed a wife for cover? He was a violent man looking for a woman to control. He was a gambler who would lose everything and leave her worse off than before. Every possibility was terrifying. But then she looked at her father. She looked at Clara. She looked at the foreclosure notice nailed to the door. And she realized that the most terrifying thing of all was doing nothing. On the third day, she walked into town and asked Bill Tucker at the general store if he knew where Caleb Hayes was staying. Hayes, that mountain fellow. Bill scratched his chin. Saw him camped by the creek this morning, about a mile north of the old Miller Bridge. Emma thanked him and walked north. She found Caleb exactly where Bill said he would be. He was sitting by a small fire cooking beans in a tin pot, his horse grazing nearby. He looked up when he heard her coming, but didn't stand. "Miss Whitmore." "Mr. Hayes." She stood across the fire from him. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I have conditions," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "First, you pay the debt in full before the wedding. Not after. Before." "Fair enough." "Second, Clara stays at the ranch. You hire someone to help her run it. She's 17. She can't do it alone." "Agreed." "Third, if you ever raise a hand to me ever, I will leave. And I will take whatever I can carry." Caleb looked at her. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Something that might have been respect. "Miss Whitmore, I have never struck a woman in my life, and I never will." "Words are easy, Mr. Hayes." "Then watch my actions." They stared at each other across the fire. The flames crackled and popped. "I have one condition of my own," Caleb said. "What is it?" "When we reach the mountains, you don't ask questions about my past until I'm ready to answer them." Emma frowned. "That's a big ask from a man who wants me to trust him." "I know it is, and I know I have no right to ask it, but I'm asking anyway." She studied his face. There was no malice there, no deception that she could detect, just a man carrying something heavy asking for time to set it down. "Fine," she said. "But when you're ready, I want the truth. All of it." "You'll have it." Emma took a breath, the biggest breath of her life. "Then I accept." Caleb nodded. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just nodded like a man who had just signed a contract he intended to honor. "I'll have the debt paid by Friday," he said. "Friday is 3 days from now." "I know." Emma waited for him to explain how a man with an old horse and patched clothes was going to produce $1,100 in 3 days. He didn't explain. He just went back to stirring his beans. She walked home with her head spinning. What had she just done? Caleb paid the debt on Thursday, 1 day early. Emma found out when Fletcher Grimes showed up at her door again, but this time without the smile. This time he looked confused, almost irritated. "Miss Whitmore," he said, and his voice was different now. "Careful. It appears your account has been settled in full." Emma blinked. "Settled." $1,142, paid in cash. This morning. $1,142. He'd paid even the interest she didn't know about. Who paid it? She asked, though she already knew. A Mr. Caleb Hayes. He walked into the bank, put cash on the counter and said, and I quote, "Apply this to the Whitmore account. Every penny." Grimes paused. "I must say I didn't know the man had that kind of money." Neither did Emma. "The foreclosure notice is withdrawn," Grimes continued. "Your property is clear." He handed her a receipt. She took it with numb fingers. "Good day, Miss Whitmore." He left. Emma closed the door and leaned against it. She pressed the receipt to her chest and slid down to the floor. Clara found her there 10 minutes later. "Emma. Emma, what happened? Are you hurt?" "The debt is paid," Emma whispered. "What? What? How?" Emma looked up at her sister. I'm getting married, Clara. Clara's face went through 6 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, shock, hope, fear, suspicion, and finally the one that hurt the most, relief. To who? Clara asked. Caleb Hayes. The mountain man. Clara's eyes went wide. Emma, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. But you don't even know him. Nobody knows him. He lives alone in the wilderness like some kind of I don't even know what. He paid our debt, Clara. Every dollar. He's going to hire someone to help you with the ranch. He's keeping his promises. But why? What does he want? Emma was quiet for a moment. He says he wants a partner. That's what he says. What does he want? Emma didn't have an answer for that, and the silence that followed scared her more than any foreclosure notice ever could. The news traveled through town like wildfire. Emma Whitmore, the proud, stubborn, sharp-tongued daughter of a dying rancher, was marrying Caleb Hayes, the strange mountain hermit who came to town once every few months and spoke to nobody. The reactions were exactly what Emma expected. Margaret Holloway laughed so hard she spilled her coffee on her dress. She's marrying a beggar, an actual genuine beggar. Ruth Dawson shook her head sadly. Poor thing, she must be truly desperate. And Patricia Banks. Patricia with her banker husband, and her silk dresses, and her superiority. Patricia just smiled and said, well, I suppose when a woman has no other options, she'll settle for anything. The words got back to Emma within hours. Everything always did in a small town. She was standing in the feed store when old Tom Harris walked up to her, hat in hand, genuine worry on his face. Emma, honey, I've known you since you were a baby. Your daddy and I have been friends for 30 years. I gotta ask, are you sure about this? I'm sure, Mr. Harris. You don't know this man. Nobody does. I know he paid my father's debt without being asked twice. I know he hasn't broken a single promise he's made to me. That's more than I can say for most people in this town. Tom Harris looked at her with sad eyes. There's talk, Emma. People are saying things. People always say things, Mr. Harris. That doesn't make them true. They're saying he's not right. That a man who lives alone in the mountains never talks to anybody, never shows his face. They're saying something must be wrong with him. Emma felt the anger rise again, but she pushed it down. Tom was a good man. He was just scared for her. Let them talk, she said. I've made my decision. Tom Harris nodded slowly. He put his hat back on. Your daddy know. I'm telling him tonight. God help you, girl. Telling her father was the hardest thing Emma had ever done. Harder than selling her mother's jewelry. Harder than lying about the bills. Harder than standing on that porch at midnight and saying yes to a stranger's proposal. She sat on the edge of his bed and held his hand and told him everything. Henry Whitmore listened without interrupting. When she finished, his face was still. Too still. This man, Henry said slowly. This Hayes. He paid the whole debt. Every penny, Daddy. Cash. Cash. Henry's eyes narrowed. Where does a man who lives alone in the mountains get $1,100 in cash? I don't know. You didn't ask. He asked me not to ask about his past, not yet. He said he'd tell me when he's ready. Henry stared at her. The cough was building in his chest. She could hear it rattling, but he held it back through sheer force of will. Emma Rose Whitmore, you are the smartest woman I have ever known. Your mother was brilliant, and you got every ounce of it. So you tell me, does this feel right to you, in your gut? Not your head, your gut. Emma closed her eyes. She searched for the answer in the only place that mattered. Yes, she said. It feels right. Then I trust you. He squeezed her hand. His grip was weak, but the love behind it was iron. But you listen to me, girl. If that man hurts you, if he so much as makes you cry from cruelty, you come home. You hear me? You come home, and I will find a way to deal with him, even if I have to crawl out of this bed to do it. Emma laughed. It came out wet and broken, half laugh and half sob. I hear you, Daddy. Good. He leaned back against his pillow. Now go on. Get out of here. Let an old man rest." She kissed his forehead and walked to the door. "Emma." She turned. "I'm proud of you. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you." She made it to the hallway before the tears came. The wedding took place on a Saturday morning. There was no church, no flowers, no guests, just Emma Caleb, the justice of the peace, Clara as witness, and the sound of wind through the courthouse windows. Emma wore her mother's dress, the only thing she hadn't sold. The one thing she would have starved before giving up. It was faded and a little too loose on her frame, but when she put it on that morning and looked in the mirror, she saw her mother's face looking back at her. "You look beautiful," Clara said, and then immediately started crying. "Stop it," Emma said. "If you start, I'll start, and then we'll both look like drowned cats." Clara laughed through her tears. The ceremony lasted 4 minutes. Caleb stood beside her in his cleanest shirt, which wasn't very clean, and his least worn boots, which were still pretty worn. He said his vows in a low, steady voice without hesitation, without looking anywhere but directly at Emma. "I take this woman as my wife. I will protect her. I will provide for her. I will honor her for as long as I live." Simple words. But the way he said them, the weight behind each one made Emma's breath catch. When it was her turn, she said her vows too. And she meant every word, even though she wasn't sure yet what those words would cost her. "I take this man as my husband. I will stand beside him. I will work beside him. I will trust him until he gives me reason not to." The justice of the peace raised an eyebrow at that last line, but he said nothing. They signed the papers. It was done. They were married. Caleb turned to her when they stepped outside. "We leave in the morning," he said. "Pack what you need. Leave the rest." "Where exactly are we going?" "Home." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." Emma looked at him, this strange, quiet, impossible man who had just become her husband. "You know," she said, "most men at least smile on their wedding day." Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "I'll smile when you're safe," he said. And for some reason, she couldn't explain that answer, scared her more than anything else he'd said. That night, Emma packed a single bag. She folded her clothes carefully. She tucked in a photograph of her mother. She wrapped her father's pocket watch in a handkerchief he'd given it to her that afternoon, pressing it into her hands with trembling fingers. "It was my father's," he said, "and his father's before him. You keep it. You keep time for this family now." She held it against her heart for a long time before putting it in the bag. Clara stood in the doorway watching her pack. "I don't want you to go," Clara said. "I know. What if something happens to you up there? What if he's not who he says he is? Then I'll handle it." "Emma." "Clara." Emma stopped packing and turned to face her sister. "I need you to listen to me. I need you to be strong. I need you to take care of Daddy and run this ranch and not fall apart. Can you do that?" Clara's lip trembled. "I'm 17, Emma. I know how old you are, and I know what you're capable of. You're a Whitmore. We don't break." Clara nodded. She wiped her eyes. "I'll write to you," Emma said. "Every week. You promise?" "I promise." They held each other in the dark room for a long time, listening to their father cough in the next room, listening to the wind push against the walls of the house that was no longer in danger of being taken away. In the morning, Emma Whitmore walked out of her father's house with one bag over her shoulder and a marriage certificate in her pocket. Caleb was waiting at the gate. His horse was saddled. A second horse, a brown gelding with kind eyes, stood beside it. "Where did that come from?" Emma asked. "Bought it yesterday. For you." "With what money?" Caleb didn't answer. He just took her bag and secured it to the saddle. Emma mounted the horse. She looked back at the ranch at Clara standing on the porch at the window where she knew her father was watching at the life she was leaving behind. Then she turned forward. "Let's go," she said. And they rode into the mountains. The trail narrowed within the first hour. The trees grew thicker. The air changed cooler, sharper, carrying the smell of pine and cold water and something ancient. Emma watched Caleb's back as he rode ahead of her. He moved differently out here. In town, he had been quiet, almost invisible. Out here, he was alert, focused. His eyes swept the trail, constantly reading signs she couldn't see. "You know these mountains well," she said. "I should. I've lived in them most of my life." "How long?" "Long enough." "That's not an answer either." He glanced back at her. "You're going to keep doing that, aren't you? Pushing until I talk. I married you, Mr. Hayes. The least you can do is have a conversation with me." Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "Fair enough. I've been in these mountains since I was 19. That's 11 years. Alone. Mostly. Don't you get lonely?" He was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was hooves on stone and wind through trees. "Lonely is better than betrayed," he said. And then he turned forward and didn't speak again for 2 hours. Emma rode behind him in silence, replaying those words. Lonely is better than betrayed. What had happened to this man who betrayed him? And why did that single sentence carry more pain than anything she had heard from anyone in her entire life? The sun moved across the sky. The trail climbed higher. Emma's legs ached and her back protested, but she didn't complain. She refused to give him the satisfaction of thinking she couldn't handle it. Late in the afternoon, Caleb stopped. "We'll camp here tonight," he said. "We'll reach the cabin tomorrow by midday." He dismounted and began unpacking with the efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Emma slid off her horse and stretched. Every muscle in her body screamed. "Are you all right?" Caleb asked without looking at her. "Fine." "You don't have to pretend you know. It's a hard ride." "I said I'm fine." He glanced at her. That almost smile again. "You really are stubborn. My father calls it determination." "Your father is being polite." Emma stared at him. And then, for the first time since this whole insane arrangement began, she laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and unexpected. Caleb looked at her like he'd never heard the sound before. Maybe he hadn't. Not in 11 years. That night they sat on opposite sides of the fire. Caleb cooked a simple meal, beans, dried meat, coffee. He handed her a plate without a word. They ate in silence. Then Emma set down her plate and looked across the flames at the man she had married. "Tell me one true thing," she said. "Not about your past, not about your secrets, just one true thing about who you are right now." Caleb stared into the fire. The flames painted shadows across his face. "I'm afraid," he said. Emma blinked. Of all the things she expected him to say, that was not one of them. "Afraid of what?"
He looked up at her, and in that moment, with the fire between them and the mountains all around them and the stars pressing down like witnesses, she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. "That I'll disappoint you," he said, and then he stood, walked to his bedroll, and lay down with his back to her. Emma sat by the fire alone, watching the sparks rise into the darkness, and for the first time since she said yes to this impossible arrangement, she felt something she didn't expect. She felt like she might have married a good man. She just didn't know yet what that man was hiding. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that when the truth came out, whatever it was, nothing would ever be the same. The fire crackled, the mountains waited, and Emma Whitmore, the desperate bride with nothing left to lose, closed her eyes and let the darkness take her into sleep, with no idea that the life she was riding toward was bigger, more dangerous, and more extraordinary than anything she had ever imagined. Emma woke before dawn with her back aching and her neck stiff and the smell of coffee already drifting through the cold air. She opened her eyes and saw Caleb crouched by the fire, pouring from a tin pot into 2 cups. He didn't look at her, but he knew she was awake. "Coffee's ready," he said. She sat up and took the cup he held out. Their fingers brushed for half a second. He pulled his hand back like he'd touched something hot. They drank in silence. Emma studied him over the rim of her cup. In the gray morning light, he looked older than she'd first thought. Not in years and weight, like a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had learned to hide the strain. "How far?" she asked. 4 hours, maybe 5. "You said we'd be there by midday." "We will, if we leave now." Emma set down her cup and stood. Her legs protested. Her hips ached. But she didn't make a sound. She just walked to her horse and started saddling up. Caleb watched her for a moment. Then he nodded that same quiet nod she was learning to read and began packing the camp. They rode for 2 hours without speaking. The trail climbed higher and the air thinned, and Emma's ears popped twice. She was about to break the silence when Caleb suddenly pulled his horse to a stop and held up one hand. "What is it?" Emma whispered. "Quiet." She froze. Caleb sat perfectly still in his saddle, his head tilted, listening to something she couldn't hear. His right hand moved slowly to his hip, where a revolver sat in a worn holster she hadn't noticed before. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. Then Caleb relaxed. His hand moved away from the gun. "Bear," he said, "about 200 yards east. Moving away from us." "You heard a bear from 200 yards. You learn to listen when your life depends on it." Emma stared at the revolver on his hip. "You carry a gun." "Everyone in these mountains carries a gun, Miss Whitmore." "You can call me Emma. We're married." He glanced back at her. Something shifted in his expression, something she couldn't quite name. "Emma," he said, like he was testing the word, like he was tasting it. Then he turned forward, and they kept riding. Another hour passed. The trail split into 3 directions at a massive rock formation, and Caleb took the path on the far left, the one that looked the least like a path. It was narrow, overgrown, almost invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. "Nobody would find this by accident," Emma said. "That's the point. Why do you need a path nobody can find?" Caleb didn't answer. They rode on, and then without warning the trail opened up. Emma pulled her horse to a stop. Her hands went slack on the reins. Her mouth fell open, and for a full 10 seconds, she forgot to breathe. She had expected a cabin, a small, rough, lonely cabin with a leaking roof and a wood stove and maybe a chicken or two scratching in the dirt. That is not what she found. What she found was impossible. A valley stretched out before her, wide and green and alive. And in that valley, dozens of workers moved between buildings. Cattle grazed in organized pastures. Fences ran in perfect lines across the land. A large estate sat at the center of it all. Not a mansion, not a palace, but a real, substantial, beautifully built home made of timber and stone. Emma couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She just sat on her horse and stared at the life her husband had been hiding from the entire world. Caleb had stopped a few feet ahead of her. He didn't turn around. He just sat there, his back straight, waiting. "What is this?" Emma finally said. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Home," Caleb said. "This is not a cabin." "I never said it was a cabin." Emma's voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "You let me believe you had nothing. You let everyone believe you had nothing. You showed up in town with patched clothes and a tired horse, and you let the whole world think you were a beggar." "I never said I was poor, Emma. People assumed." "And you didn't correct them." "No, I didn't." The rage hit her so fast and so hard that her vision blurred. She dismounted before she even made the decision to do it. Her boots hit the ground, and she was walking toward him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Get off that horse," she said. Caleb looked down at her. "Emma, get off that horse and look me in the eye." He dismounted slowly. He stood in front of her, and for the first time she realized how tall he was, how broad, how completely different he looked standing in front of this valley compared to how he'd looked watering his horse outside Bill Tucker's store. "You lied to me," she said. "I never lied. You let me believe I was marrying a man with nothing. You let me stand in front of a justice of the peace and marry a stranger I thought was as poor as I was. You let me think I was sacrificing my future for survival. You were surviving. That part was true. Don't play word games with me, Caleb Hayes. Don't you dare." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I had my reasons." "Then tell me, right now, tell me your reasons." "It's complicated." "Uncomplicated." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, raw, naked vulnerability, the kind a man spends years burying and only shows when he has no other choice. "Because every person who ever knew what I had tried to take it from me," he said, "every single one." Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. "My own family." Caleb continued, his voice low and rough. "My business partners, people I grew up with, people I trusted. The moment they found out what this valley was worth, I stopped being a person and became an opportunity. So you hid. I survived, same as you." The words landed like a slap, because he was right. She had married him for survival. She had accepted his proposal not out of love or attraction or even curiosity, but because she was drowning and he was the only hand reaching down. How was that any different from what he'd done? Emma unclenched her fists. The anger was still there, hot and sharp and justified, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something uncomfortable. Something that felt dangerously close to understanding. How much, she asked? How much what? How much is all of this worth? The land, the cattle, the operations? How much? Caleb was quiet for a long time. More than you want to know. Try me. The land alone is worth over $200,000. The cattle operations bring in about $40,000 a year. There are mineral rights on the eastern ridge that I haven't even begun to develop. And there's timber old growth worth more than most men will see in 10 lifetimes. Emma felt the ground shift under her feet. Not literally, but something inside her tilted, and for a moment she thought she might fall. $200,000. Her father's entire debt, the debt that had nearly destroyed her family, was $1,100. This man could have paid it 100 times over without blinking. You could have told me, she whispered. If I had told you, would you have married me? Of course I would have. Why wouldn't I? Because then you would have married me for the money, and I would have spent the rest of my life wondering. Emma stared at him, wondering whether you would have married the man without it. The silence between them stretched so long that Emma could hear her own heartbeat. You wanted to know, she said slowly, if I would choose you when you had nothing. Yes, and I did. You did. She looked at him, this impossible, infuriating, secretive man, and she felt something crack inside her chest, not break, crack, like a wall developing its first fracture. I'm still angry, she said. I know. I'm going to be angry for a long time. I know that too. But I understand why you did it. She paused. And I hate that I understand. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. That's fair. They stood there for another moment. Two strangers who were also husband and wife, standing at the edge of a valley that changed everything. Then Emma straightened her shoulders. Show me, she said. Show you what? Everything, all of it. If I'm going to live here, I want to know what I'm living in. Caleb nodded, and this time for the first time she saw something in his face that might have been relief. They walked down into the valley together, leading their horses, and every step Emma took felt like walking into a life she never knew existed. A man was waiting for them at the main gate. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a weathered face and hands that had clearly spent decades working hard. When he saw Caleb, his entire posture changed. He stood straighter, his eyes sharpened. Mr. Hayes, the man said, welcome back. Sam, Caleb nodded toward Emma. This is my wife, Emma. Sam's eyebrows shot up so fast they nearly left his face. Your wife. That's what I said. Sam recovered quickly. He removed his hat and gave Emma a respectful nod. Ma'am, it's a pleasure. I'm Sam Dawkins. I've been managing Mr. Hayes's operations for the past 7 years. Managing, Emma repeated. So you know about all of this? Yes, ma'am. Every acre. Emma turned to Caleb. He knows, but I didn't. Sam works for me. He needed to know. And your wife didn't. Caleb had the decency to look uncomfortable. I was going to tell you. Today, right now, this is me telling you. No, Caleb? This is me finding out because I rode 4 hours into the mountains and saw it with my own eyes. That's not telling. That's getting caught. Sam looked between them with the expression of a man who desperately wanted to be somewhere else. I'll have the house prepared, Sam said, and disappeared so fast he practically left a dust trail. Emma and Caleb stood alone again. We need to talk, Emma said. I know, not later, not when you're ready, now. Caleb took a long breath. Come inside. He led her to the main house. She followed her mind, churning her emotions, swinging between fury and fascination with every step. The house was solid and well built. Not extravagant, Caleb clearly wasn't a man who cared about luxury, but comfortable, functional. The kind of home a person builds when they plan to stay forever. They sat across from each other at a large wooden table in the main room. Caleb poured 2 glasses of water and set one in front of her. Ask, he said, who are you really? Not the man in town, not the mountain hermit. Who are you? Caleb leaned back in his chair. My name is Caleb James Hayes. My grandfather William Hayes came to this territory 40 years ago with nothing. He found this valley. He built everything you see: cattle, timber, land. By the time he died, he was one of the wealthiest men in the region. And nobody knew. People knew. The people who mattered knew. But my grandfather was a private man. He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust politicians. He didn't trust anyone who hadn't earned it. Sounds familiar, Emma muttered. Caleb ignored that. When he died, everything passed to my father. My father was... He stopped. His jaw tightened. My father was not my grandfather. What does that mean? It means my father trusted the wrong people. He brought in partners, business associates, family members. He believed money could buy loyalty, and it couldn't. It bought the opposite. The partners wanted more. The family wanted control, and when my father wouldn't give it to them, they started fighting. Lawsuits, threats, sabotage. What happened to your father? Caleb's expression went flat, completely, totally flat, like a door slamming shut behind his eyes. He died, Caleb said, when I was 18. How? That's a question for another day, Emma. She wanted to push. Every instinct told her to push. But something in his voice, something broken and buried, stopped her. Go on, she said. When my father died, everything was supposed to go to his partners. That was the arrangement they'd forced on him. But my grandfather had been smarter than all of them. He'd set up a separate deed, hidden legal, untouchable, that passed the core property directly to me on my 19th birthday. So you inherited all of this at 19? Yes. And the partners, they were furious. They challenged the deed in court. They lost. They tried to buy me out. I refused. They tried to intimidate me. I moved up here permanently and cut off contact with everyone. 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 Emma sat with him for a moment, 19 years old, alone, surrounded by enemies, in possession of a fortune he never asked for. And you've been hiding ever since, she said. I prefer protecting. You've been hiding, Caleb. Call it what it is. He looked at her, and for the second time that day, she saw that crack in his armor, that flash of something human and hurting underneath the control. Yes, he said quietly. I've been hiding. From who? The partners they lost in court. The partners were just the beginning. My father's family, my uncles, my cousins, they never stopped. They believe this land is rightfully theirs. They've been trying to find legal ways to take it for the past 11 years. Are they dangerous? Some of them. How dangerous? Caleb met her eyes. Dangerous enough that I carry a gun on a trail where the only threat should be bears. Emma felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the mountain air. And you brought me into this, she said. I brought you into a home. I brought you into safety. Nobody knows you're here. Nobody knows we're married. Yet, he agreed. Emma stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the valley, the workers, the cattle, the fences, the life that this man had built and defended alone for over a decade. Why me? She asked without turning around. You could have married anyone. With this kind of money, you could have had any woman in the territory. I didn't want any woman in the territory. Then why me? Because you were the only person I'd met in 11 years who looked at a man with nothing and didn't walk away. Emma turned around. You tested me. I watched you. There's a difference. No, there isn't. You set up a test. You dressed like a beggar. You rode a tired horse. You showed up with nothing, and you waited to see who would still say yes. And you said yes. Because I was desperate. Maybe at first. But when you stood across that fire and gave me your conditions, when you looked me in the eye and said, if I ever raised a hand to you, you'd leave. That wasn't desperation, Emma. That was strength. And that's what I was looking for. She stared at him for a long time. Her heart was pounding. Her mind was racing. Everything she thought she knew about her life, her marriage, her future, all of it had been turned upside down in the span of an hour. I need time, she said. Take as much as you need. I need to write to Clara. She needs to know I'm safe. I'll have a letter sent tomorrow. I have men who ride to town regularly. Men who ride to town, Emma repeated. You have employees, workers, an entire operation, and nobody in town knows any of this. A few people know, people I trust. Sam, a handful of others, but the town numb. To them, I'm just the strange man who comes down from the mountains every few months for supplies. And you want to keep it that way? For now, yes. Emma nodded. She picked up her glass of water and drank it slowly, buying herself time to think. I have a new condition, she said. What is it? No more secrets. Not about the money, not about the ranch, not about your family. If I'm your wife, I'm your partner. That means I know everything. Everything takes time, Emma. Then start now, one thing at a time. But you start and you don't stop until I know it all. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, the instinct to protect his secrets, fighting against the reality that he had married a woman who would not be managed or controlled or kept in the dark. All right, he said, one thing at a time. Good, Emma set down her glass. Now show me the rest of this place. If I'm going to live here, I want to understand exactly what I married into. They spent the rest of the day walking the property. Sam joined them, and Emma asked questions, relentless, detailed, sharp questions that made Sam raise his eyebrows more than once. How many head of cattle? She asked. About 800, ma'am. About you don't know the exact number. Sam glanced at Caleb. Caleb's mouth twitched. 782 at last count, Sam said. When was last count? 3 weeks ago. That's too long. My father counted his cattle every week, and he only had 40 head. You've got nearly 800, and you're counting every 3 weeks. Sam looked at Caleb again. This time Caleb actually smiled. A real smile. Small but real. She's right, Sam, Caleb said. Yes, sir. Sam cleared his throat. I'll adjust the schedule. Emma kept walking. She asked about the fences, the water sources, the feed operations, the number of workers, their wages, their housing. She asked about the timber contracts, the mineral rights, the legal protections on the property. By the end of this day, Sam looked exhausted. Caleb looked something Emma hadn't seen before. Impressed. That evening, they sat at the table again. Sam had prepared a simple dinner, far better than trail beans, and they ate in a silence that was different from the silences before. This one wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. You know ranching, Caleb said. I grew up on a ranch. Just because it failed doesn't mean I didn't learn anything. Your father's ranch didn't fail because of bad management. It failed because of bad luck. Bad luck and not enough money. Those are usually the same thing. Emma looked at him. Is that what you learned from your grandfather, that money solves everything? No, my grandfather taught me that money protects what matters. There's a difference. And what matters to you, Caleb? He set down his fork. He looked at her across the table with those steady, unreadable eyes. Ask me again in a year, he said. Why a year? Because right now, you wouldn't believe my answer. Emma felt her pulse quicken. She didn't look away. Neither did he. Try me, she said, not tonight. He stood. I'll show you your room. You should rest. My room. We have separate rooms until you decide otherwise. Emma blinked. Of all the things she had braced herself for, awkwardness, expectation, the uncomfortable reality of sharing a home with a stranger, she'd married separate rooms had not been on her list. You're giving me my own space, she said. I told you I'd protect you, Emma. That includes protecting you from feeling pressured by me. She stared at him, and something inside her, that crack in the wall, widened just a little bit more. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded and led her down the hall to a room that was simple but clean. A bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the valley. Good night, Emma. Good night, Caleb. He turned to leave. Caleb, he stopped. That thing you're afraid of disappointing me. She paused. You haven't. Not yet. Something moved across his face. Something raw and unguarded and gone before she could name it. Good night, he said again, softer this time. And then he was gone. Emma sat on the edge of the bed in the room that belonged to her, in the house that belonged to her husband, in the valley that belonged to a man she was only beginning to understand. She pulled out her father's pocket watch and held it in her hands. What have I gotten myself into, Daddy? She whispered. The watch ticked steadily. It didn't answer, but somehow holding it made her feel like her father was close, like her mother was close, like all the Whitmore strength that had carried her family through 30 years of hardship was still inside her, waiting to be used. She lay down and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come easy. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why did he really choose her? What happened to his father? Who were these relatives who wanted to take everything? And the question that scared her most of all, the one she kept pushing away, and it kept pushing back. Was she starting to feel something for him? Not gratitude, not obligation, something deeper, something she had no business feeling for a man she'd known for less than 2 weeks. She turned on her side and pressed her face into the pillow. Stop it, she told herself. Just stop it. But she couldn't stop the last image that flashed through her mind before sleep finally took her. Caleb's face when she told him he hadn't disappointed her. The way his eyes changed. The way his armor cracked. The way he looked for just 1 second, like a man who had been waiting his entire life to hear those words. She fell asleep with that image behind her eyes. And in the morning, everything changed again. She woke to shouting, not the kind of shouting she was used to, the casual yelling of ranch hands calling to each other across a field. This was different. This was urgent, angry, afraid. Emma threw off the blanket and ran to the window. In the yard below, Sam was arguing with two men she had never seen before. They wore dark coats and clean hats, town clothes, not ranch clothes, and they stood with a rigid posture of men who were used to being obeyed. Caleb was already outside. He stood between Sam and the strangers, his body still, his hands at his sides, his voice too low for Emma to hear from the window. She pulled on her boots and ran downstairs. By the time she reached the front door, the argument had escalated. One of the strangers, the taller one with a narrow face and cold eyes, was pointing a finger at Caleb's chest. You can't hide up here forever, Caleb. The family knows. The lawyers know. This isn't going away. Caleb's voice was ice. Get off my land, Marcus. Marcus. The name hit Emma like a gust of cold wind. Caleb had mentioned his family uncle's cousins. Was this one of them? Your land. Marcus laughed. It was an ugly sound. This land belongs to the Hayes family, all of us. Not just you. The deed says otherwise. The deed is doing, and so do I. Marcus stepped closer. His voice dropped. Listen to me carefully, cousin. Uncle Robert is losing patience. He's got lawyers in 3 counties working on this. He's got judges who owe him favors. You can play rancher up here all you want, but this is coming to a head. And when it does, you're going to lose. I haven't lost yet. You haven't fought yet. There's a difference. Marcus's eyes slid past Caleb and landed on Emma, who was standing in the doorway. And who is this? Caleb shifted his body, placing himself between Emma and Marcus. None of your concern. She's pretty, Marcus smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't tell me you actually found someone willing to live up here with you. What did you promise her, Caleb? The whole mountain. I said get off my land. We're leaving. Marcus straightened his coat. But we'll be back. Uncle Robert wanted me to deliver a message. He's filing a new claim. This time it's going all the way to the territorial court. And this time, Caleb, he's going to win. Marcus turned and walked away. The second man, who hadn't spoken a word the entire time, followed. They mounted their horses and rode out of the valley without looking back. The silence they left behind was suffocating. Sam spoke first. Caleb, if Robert is going to the territorial court, I know, Sam. We need a lawyer, a real one, not the one in town. I know. This is different from before. If they've got judges. I said I know. Caleb's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Sam fell silent. He looked at Emma, then back at Caleb, then walked away without another word. Emma stepped off the porch and walked to her husband. He was standing with his back to her, his fists clenched, his breathing controlled but heavy. Caleb, you shouldn't have come outside. I heard shouting. I came. That's what people do. Those men are dangerous, Emma. If they know about you, they already saw me. That ship has sailed. Caleb turned around. His face was tight, his jaw locked, his eyes burning with something between anger and fear. This is what I was trying to protect you from, he said. By keeping me in the dark. That's not protection, Caleb. That's control. It's not. Who is Marcus? Who is Robert? How many of them are there, and how long have they been coming after you? Caleb stared at her. She could see him fighting at the instinct to shut down, to build the wall back up, to handle everything alone, the way he'd been doing for 11 years. Emma, this isn't your fight. I'm your wife. Everything is my fight. The words came out stronger than she intended. They surprised her almost as much as they surprised him. Caleb searched her face. Whatever he was looking for, he found it. Marcus is my cousin, he said. Robert is my uncle, my father's brother. When my grandfather's deed passed everything to me, Robert went to war. He's been fighting me in court for 11 years. He's lost every time. But he keeps coming back. And every time he comes back, stronger. And this new claim, the territorial court, if Robert gets a case in front of a territorial judge, he controls, he could overturn the deed. He could take the land, everything. Can he do that? Legally, maybe. With enough money and the right judge, almost certainly. Emma felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders. She had escaped one impossible situation, her father's debt, the foreclosure, the desperation, only to walk straight into another one. But this time was different. This time she wasn't alone, and this time she wasn't helpless. Then we fight, she said. Caleb blinked. What? We fight? You've been fighting alone for 11 years. That's over. You married me for a partner. Well, now you have one. Emma, you don't understand what these people are capable of. I stood up to Patricia Banks on the main street of town when she insulted my dying father to my face. I sold my mother's jewelry to keep a roof over my sister's head. I married a complete stranger to save my family. She stepped closer to him. Don't tell me what I'm not capable of understanding. Caleb looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't guarded or controlled or carefully hidden. It was hope, raw, terrified, fragile hope. You really mean that, he said. Every word. He stood there for a long moment. The valley was quiet around them. The workers had gone, still watching from a distance, sensing that something important was happening between the boss and his new wife. All right, Caleb said. Then I'll tell you everything, all of it, starting right now. Starting with your father, Emma said. You told me he died when you were 18. I need to know how. Caleb's face went pale. She watched the color drain out of him like water from a cracked glass. Not out here, he said, inside. They went back to the table. Caleb sat down heavy like a man about to unload a burden he had been carrying since he was barely a man himself. My father's name was Thomas Hayes, he began. He was a good man, not a strong man, not like my grandfather, but good, kind. He wanted to believe the best about people. And that got him in trouble. It killed him. Caleb's voice was flat. Robert, his own brother, convinced him to bring in outside investors. They were going to expand the ranch, develop the timber, mine the minerals. It was supposed to make everyone rich. But Robert wanted more. Robert wanted everything. He started forging documents, moving money, cutting my father out of decisions. By the time my father realized what was happening, he'd already lost control of half the operation. What did he do? He confronted Robert, told him to get out. Robert refused. They fought not with fists, with lawyers. The legal battle dragged on for months. My father stopped eating, stopped sleeping. The stress destroyed him. Caleb stopped. His hands were on the table and Emma could see them trembling. One morning I woke up and found him in his study. He'd been there all night. He was sitting in his chair with a stack of legal documents in his lap. Caleb, I was gone. The doctor said his heart gave out. But I know what really killed him. It wasn't his heart. It was his brother. Emma reached across the table and put her hand on top of his. He flinched just slightly, but he didn't pull away. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be sorry. Be ready. He looked up at her, and his eyes were hard again, hard and clear and burning. Because Robert is coming for everything my father died trying to protect. And this time I'm not going to let him win. Emma squeezed his hand. Neither am I. They sat there together, hands touching two people who had started as strangers and were becoming something neither of them had a name for yet. Outside, the valley went on with its business. The cattle grazed. The workers moved. The mountains stood guard around it all. But inside that house, something had shifted. A partnership had been forged, not on paper, not in a courthouse, but in the space between two people who had both been broken by the world and were choosing for the first time to stop fighting alone. Caleb pulled his hand back slowly. He stood up. There's something else you should know, he said. What? Marcus said Robert is filing a new claim. But that's not the real threat. What's the real threat? Caleb walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out a wooden box. He set it on the table and opened the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, maybe 100, all addressed to Caleb, all unopened. Robert has been writing to me for years, Caleb said. Threats, offers, demands. I stopped reading them a long time ago. Why, because reading them was killing me the same way the legal fight killed my father. Emma pulled the box toward her. She picked up the top letter and looked at the date. It was from 3 weeks ago. May I, she asked. Go ahead. She opened it. She read it once, then she read it again. Then she set it down on the table and looked at Caleb with an expression that made his blood run cold. Caleb, she said, her voice steady and controlled. This letter isn't a threat. It's a deadline. Robert is giving you 60 days to sign over the property voluntarily. If you refuse, he says, he has evidence that your grandfather's deed was forged. That's a lie. The deed is legitimate. I believe you, but he says he has a witness, someone who was there when the deed was drafted, someone who will testify that your grandfather was coerced. Caleb's face changed. The hard confidence she'd seen moments ago crumbled, and underneath it, she saw raw fear. That's impossible, he whispered. There's nobody left who was there. They're all dead. According to this letter, one of them isn't. Caleb took the letter from her hands. He read it. His face went white, then gray, then something beyond color, something hollow and sick. Samuel Briggs, and he said, that's the name. Samuel Briggs. Do you know him? How was my grandfather's lawyer? He drafted the original deed. He was the only person outside the family who knew the full terms. And Robert found him. Robert found him or bought him. Caleb set the letter down. His hands were shaking. If Briggs testifies that the deed was forged or coerced, it won't matter what the court records say. A territorial judge will have grounds to void the entire inheritance. Then we find Briggs first, Emma said. What? We find him before Robert puts him on a witness stand. We talk to him. We find out what he actually knows and what he's been paid to say. Emma, you don't even know where he is. Neither does Robert apparently, or he wouldn't have given you 60 days. He's still looking. That means we still have time. Caleb stared at her. You've been my wife for 2 days. And in 2 days, I've learned more about your life than you wanted me to know in a year. So either trust me or don't, Caleb. But stop acting like you're the only person capable of solving this. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're terrifying, he said. Thank you. And for the first time since she had arrived in the Hidden Valley, Caleb Hayes laughed. It was short and rough and surprised, like a sound that had been locked inside him for years and finally found a crack to escape through. Emma didn't smile, but she felt it. That fracture in the wall inside her chest widened just a little more. She picked up the box of letters. I'm going to read all of these, she said, every single one, tonight. You don't have to. Yes, I do. If we're going to fight Robert Hayes, I need to know everything he's said, everything he's threatened, and everything he thinks he has. Caleb watched her carry the box to her room. He stood in the hallway long after she closed the door, listening to the sound of envelopes being torn open one after another. He pressed his hand flat against the wall and closed his eyes. For 11 years, he had carried this alone. The fear, the weight, the endless grinding pressure of defending something he loved against people who wanted to destroy it. And now, sitting in a room 15 feet away, a woman he had known for less than 2 weeks was reading his worst nightmares like they were her own. He didn't know what to call what he felt. But it was the closest thing to safety he had experienced since the morning he found his father dead in that chair. Emma read every letter in that box, all 93 of them. She read through the night, sitting cross-legged on her bed with the envelopes spread around her like fallen leaves. Some were short, 2 lines, 3 lines, barely more than threats scribbled on expensive paper. Others were long, detailed, written by lawyers in language designed to intimidate and confuse. But Emma was not confused. She was the daughter of a rancher who had spent 30 years fighting drought, disease, and debt. She had balanced books since she was 14. She had negotiated with feed suppliers and cattle buyers and bankers who smiled while they bled you dry. Legal language didn't scare her. It just made her angry. By dawn, she had sorted the letters into 3 piles on the floor. The first pile was threats, pure intimidation. Sign over the property or face consequences. No legal weight, just noise. The second pile was legal filings, motions, claims, petitions, all of which had been dismissed or denied over the past 11 years. Robert Hayes had been throwing everything at the wall and nothing had stuck. The third pile was different. It was small, only 7 letters, and it told a story the other 2 piles didn't. Emma carried that third pile downstairs at first light. Caleb was already at the table. He looked like he hadn't slept either. 2 cups of coffee sat in front of him, one for himself, one for her. She sat down and placed the 7 letters on the table between them. You didn't read these, she said. I told you, I stopped reading them. I know, and because you stopped, you missed something important. Caleb looked at the letters. What did I miss? Emma picked up the first one and opened it. This letter is from 18 months ago. It's from Robert's lawyer. It mentions a property survey, a new one conducted without your knowledge or consent. They can't survey my land without permission. They didn't survey your land, they surveyed the boundary, the eastern boundary specifically, and according to this letter, they found a discrepancy. Caleb went still. What kind of discrepancy? The original deed, your grandfather's deed, defines the eastern boundary using a natural landmark. A creek. The letter claims that creek has shifted course over the past 40 years, and the current path of the water puts approximately 300 acres of your eastern ridge on the wrong side of the legal boundary. That's ridiculous. The land is mine. It's always been mine. I'm not arguing with you, Caleb. I'm telling you what they're planning. She picked up the second letter. 6 months later, Robert's lawyer filed a quiet title action on those 300 acres. You never responded because you never read the letter. Caleb's face drained of color. A quiet title action. Goes through if uncontested, yes. Are you telling me they already own 300 acres of my land? I'm telling you they might. I don't know if the action was completed, but if it was, they have a foothold, and from that foothold they can challenge the rest of the deed. Caleb stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor. He paced 3 steps, turned, paced back. His hands were in his hair, and his breathing was ragged. 11 years, he said. 11 years I've been fighting them, and they got in through a letter I didn't open. Caleb, sit down. How could I be so stupid? You weren't stupid, you were surviving. There's a difference. Now sit down. He stopped pacing. He looked at her, and then slowly he sat. Emma laid out the remaining 5 letters in chronological order. Here's what happened after the boundary claim. Letter 3, Robert hired a private surveyor to document the creek's current path. Letter 4, he submitted the survey to the county records office. Letter 5, he retained a new lawyer, someone out of Denver, a man named Garrett Thornton. I've heard that name. You should have. Thornton specializes in territorial land disputes. He's won cases against the federal government. He's expensive, he's aggressive, and he doesn't lose. How do you know all this? Because I read letter 6. Thornton wrote it himself. It's not a threat. It's an invitation to negotiate. And the tone is completely different from everything Robert has sent before. Thornton is professional, precise. He laid out every legal avenue they planned to pursue, and he offered Caleb Hayes a chance to settle before it gets ugly. I'm not settling. I didn't say you should. I said you should have read the letter. Because at the bottom, Thornton mentioned something Robert's other lawyers never did. What? Emma picked up the 7th letter, the last one, the one that mattered most. This came 3 weeks ago, right before Marcus showed up here. She opened it and placed it flat on the table so Caleb could read it. Thornton states that his client, Robert Hayes, has obtained a sworn affidavit from Samuel Briggs, your grandfather's original lawyer, attesting that William Hayes was under duress when the deed was drafted and that the terms were never properly witnessed. Caleb read the letter. He read it twice. His jaw was clenched so tight Emma could see the muscles jumping under his skin. Briggs is lying, he said. Maybe. Probably, but a sworn affidavit from the man who drafted the deed is powerful evidence. If a territorial judge accepts it, your entire inheritance is in question. So what do we do? Emma leaned forward. We do 3 things. First, we find out if that quiet title action on the Eastern Acres went through. If it did, we challenge it immediately. Second, we find Samuel Briggs and get the truth out of him, the real truth, not whatever Robert paid him to say. Third, we hire our own lawyer, someone as good as Thornton, someone better. I don't trust lawyers. You don't have to trust them, you have to use them, the same way Robert is using Thornton. Caleb stared at her. You figured all of this out in one night. I read 93 letters, and I paid attention. It's not genius, Caleb, it's just work. It's more than I did in 11 years. Because you were alone, and alone is not a strategy, it's a death sentence. Those words hit something inside him. She could see it, the flinch he tried to hide, the way his shoulders dropped half an inch, the way his eyes went somewhere far away for just a moment before coming back. My father was alone, he said quietly. When Robert came after him, he tried to fight by himself. He wouldn't ask for help. He said it was his problem, his burden, his responsibility. And it killed him. Yes. Then don't be your father, Caleb. Be smarter. Be angrier. And for God's sake, let somebody help you. He looked at her for a long time. The morning light was filling the room now, and in that light she could see every line on his face, every year of isolation and fear and stubbornness carved into his features. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone who would be grateful, quiet, content to be safe. Sorry to disappoint you. You're not disappointing me, Emma. His voice was rough. You're scaring the hell out of me. She almost smiled. Good. Scared means you're paying attention. Sam knocked on the door an hour later. Emma had spread the 7 critical letters across the table and was making notes on a piece of paper, dates, names, legal terms, connections. Come in. Sam, Caleb called. Sam entered and stopped when he saw the table. His eyes moved from the letters to Emma's notes to Emma herself. Ma'am, what is all this? This is 11 years of your boss ignoring his mail. Sit down, Sam. We need to talk. Sam looked at Caleb. Caleb nodded. Sam sat. Emma laid out everything she'd found. The boundary dispute, the quiet title action, the surveyor, Thornton, the affidavit from Briggs. She spoke clearly, precisely, without emotion, the way her father used to speak when explaining a problem to his ranch hands. When she finished, Sam was pale. The quiet title action, Sam said. If that went through, then Robert has legal claim to the Eastern Ridge, the timber, the mineral rights, everything on that side of the creek. That's where the silver deposits are, Sam said. Emma's head snapped toward him. Silver, Sam looked at Caleb. Caleb's expression was unreadable. There are silver deposits on the Eastern Ridge, Caleb said slowly. My grandfather discovered them decades ago. He never mined them. He said the land was worth more whole than carved up. How much silver? According to the geological survey my grandfather commissioned and kept locked in a safe enough to supply a mint for 20 years. Emma sat back in her chair. The room felt smaller suddenly. The stakes felt enormous. Robert knows about the silver, she said. It wasn't a question. Robert has always known. That's why he wants the Eastern Ridge. That's why he's fighting so hard. It was never about the cattle or the timber. It was always about the silver. And you didn't tell me this. I was going to. When after they'd already taken it, Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm telling you now. Because I found out. Not because you volunteered it. Emma shook her head. We had a deal, Caleb. No more secrets. This isn't a secret. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated. And everything complicated gets simpler when you actually talk to the people who are trying to help you. Sam cleared his throat. If I may, ma'am, Mr. Hayes has his reasons for keeping things close. But you're right. We need to know what we're dealing with, all of us. Emma looked at Sam. She liked him. He was practical, steady, and he wasn't afraid to speak truth to his boss. Sam, I need you to ride to town. Find out if the county records office processed a quiet title action on the eastern 300 acres. Don't tell them who you are or why you're asking. Just find out. Yes, ma'am. And Sam, while you're there, I need you to send a telegram to Clara. Tell her I'm safe. Tell her the ranch is protected and someone will be coming to help her within the week. I'll handle it. Sam left. Emma and Caleb were alone again. You're giving orders to my foreman, Caleb said. Someone has to. You've been giving orders to yourself for 11 years and look where it got you. It got me a $200,000 ranch. It got you a $200,000 ranch that you might lose in 60 days because you didn't open your mail. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Fair point, he said. I know. They spent the rest of the morning going through the ranch's financial records. Caleb had been meticulous, every transaction, recorded every expense documented, but the system was chaotic. Ledgers were scattered across 3 different rooms. Some were in a locked cabinet, others were stacked on shelves with no particular order. Emma organized them in 4 hours. She created a master ledger, cross-referenced income and expenses, and identified 3 areas where the ranch was hemorrhaging money unnecessarily. You're overpaying for feed, she told Caleb over lunch. Your supplier in town is charging you 20% above market rate. He's the only supplier who delivers this far into the mountains. Then negotiate, or find another supplier, or buy in bulk twice a year instead of monthly. I never thought about it. That's because you've been so busy defending the ranch from your family that you forgot to actually run it. Caleb set down his fork. You've been here 2 days, Emma. And in 2 days, I found a legal crisis you didn't know about, organized your finances, and identified 3 ways to save money. Imagine what I'll find in a week. He shook his head, but he was smiling that small, reluctant, real smile she'd seen only twice before. My grandfather would have liked you, he said. I would have liked him too. He sounds like my father, stubborn, proud, and smart enough to plan for the future even when everyone around him was trying to tear it apart. They're alike in that way, both built something from nothing. The difference is my father didn't have enemies in his own family. No, Caleb said. He had them at the bank. Emma looked at him sharply. Then she laughed, a real surprise laugh that echoed off the walls. Touché, Mr. Hayes. Caleb. Caleb. Sam returned 2 days later with news that changed everything. Emma was in the study, a room she had claimed as her own, much to Caleb's bemused acceptance when she heard the horse. She went to the window and saw Sam riding hard, his horse lathered, his face grim. She met him at the door before Caleb did. What did you find? She asked. Sam was breathing hard. He took off his hat and wiped his forehead. The quiet title action went through, he said. 4 months ago, Robert Hayes is the legal owner of 312 acres on the Eastern Ridge. Emma felt the floor tilt beneath her. She grabbed the door frame. They already have it, she said. It's recorded, filed, legal. Caleb appeared behind her. Say that again. The Eastern Acres boss. They're gone. Robert filed the quiet title. Nobody contested it, and the county processed it. It's done. Caleb went white, then red, then something beyond color, a shade of fury Emma had never seen on a human face. He stole it, Caleb said. He waited until I wasn't paying attention, and he stole 300 acres out from under me. Caleb, Emma started. 300 acres, the silver, the timber. He just took it. Caleb, listen to me. I'm going to kill him. No, you're not. You're going to sit down and think. Think he stole my grandfather's land. And going to prison for murder won't get it back. Emma grabbed his arm. Her grip was stronger than he expected. Look at me. Look at me, Caleb. He looked at her. His eyes were wild. She'd never seen him lose control before, not like this. For 11 years, he'd been the calm one, the steady one, the man who absorbed every blow without flinching. He was flinching now. We can fight this, Emma said. A quiet title action can be challenged if the owner wasn't properly notified. Were you notified? The letters. The letters don't count as legal notification. Notification has to be served through proper channels. A sheriff's notice, a court summons, published in a newspaper. Were any of those things done? Caleb's breathing slowed. I don't know. Then we find out. And if Robert cut corners, if he pushed this through without proper service, the whole thing gets thrown out. And if he didn't cut corners, then we find another way. But we don't give up and we don't commit murder. Are we clear? Caleb stared at her. Slowly, so slowly, the wildness left his eyes. The control came back. The wall rebuilt itself brick by brick until he was Caleb Hayes again. Steady, hard, unreadable. We're clear, he said. Good. Sam, I need you to go back to town. This time go to the county clerk's office. I need copies of every document related to that quiet title action. Filing dates, notification records, everything. Yes, ma'am. Sam hesitated. Ma'am, there is something else. What? While I was in town, I heard talk. People are saying that Robert Hayes is planning to come to the valley himself, not Marcus, Robert. And he's bringing Thornton, the lawyer, within the month. Emma looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Emma. Then we have less time than we thought, she said. We have almost no time at all, he replied. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through legal strategies, financial calculations, and worst-case scenarios. At midnight, she got up and walked to the kitchen. She needed water. She needed to think. Caleb was already there. I was sitting at this table in the dark, his hands wrapped around an empty glass, staring at nothing. Can't sleep either, she asked. Haven't slept well in 11 years. She sat down across from him. The moonlight came through the window and threw long shadows across the table. Tell me about your mother, she said. Caleb looked up, surprised. My mother. You've told me about your grandfather, your father, your uncle, but you've never mentioned your mother. I was quiet for a long time. She left. When I was 12, she couldn't take it anymore, the isolation, the fighting, the pressure. She packed a bag one morning and walked out the front door and never came back. Do you know where she went? East, that's all I know. My father never talked about her after she left, and I stopped asking. Do you blame her? Caleb considered the question. Really considered it, turning it over the way Emma had turned over those letters. I used to, he said. I used to lie awake at night and hate her for leaving, for choosing herself over us, over me. And now Now I understand. She was drowning, and nobody threw her a rope. Emma felt something shift inside her chest. That crack in the wall, the one that had been widening since the first night by the fire, opened a little more. Is that why you came for me? She asked. Because you saw someone drowning. I saw someone who deserved a rope. And you just happened to have one. I had more than a rope, Emma. I had a whole valley, and no one to share it with. She looked at him in the moonlight, this complicated, wounded, impossible man who had hidden an empire behind patched clothes and a tired horse, who had tested her with poverty and silence, and found her worthy of his trust. I'm not going to leave, she said, like your mother. I want you to know that. Whatever happens with Robert, with the court, with the land, I'm not leaving. You can't promise that. I just did. Promises break, Emma. Mine don't. He stared at her, and she saw it again, that flash of hope, that terrified, fragile thing that lived behind his eyes and only came out when she said something he desperately wanted to believe. I believe you, he whispered. Good. She stood up. Now go to bed. We have a war to plan in the morning, and I need you sharp. Yes, ma'am. And this time, when he almost smiled, it was closer to real than it had ever been. 3 days later, Sam returned with the county records. Emma spread them across the study table and read every page. Caleb stood behind her, looking over her shoulder close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but not quite touching. Here, Emma said, pointing to a line on the third page. The notification. What about it? Robert's lawyer filed for notification by publication. That means they published a notice in a newspaper instead of serving you directly. So the law requires publication in a newspaper of general circulation in the county where the property is located. Look at this. She pointed to another line. The notice was published in the Denver Post. Denver is 200 miles from here. Exactly. It's not a newspaper of general circulation in this county. The local paper is the Mountain Gazette. Robert's lawyer published in Denver because he knew you'd never see it. That's a procedural violation. Caleb grabbed the back of her chair. You're saying the quiet title action is invalid. I'm saying it's challengeable. A good lawyer, our lawyer, can argue that proper notification was never achieved. If the court agrees, the action gets vacated. Robert loses the 300 acres. And the silver. Caleb's grip on the chair tightened. Can you be sure? No, nothing in law is sure, but this is a real argument, a strong one. And if we file before Robert gets to the territorial court with his bigger claim, we put him on defense instead of offense. We attack first. Caleb walked around the table and stood facing her. His expression was different now. The guarded, controlled mask was still there, but underneath it, burning through the cracks, was something fierce and alive. I need to tell you something, he said. What? When I rode to your ranch that night, when I proposed, I told myself I was doing it for practical reasons. I needed a wife to strengthen my legal position. A married man with a family has more standing in court than a bachelor hermit living alone in the mountains. Emma's stomach dropped. So it was a business decision. That's what I told myself. That's the lie I believed. He took a breath. But the truth is, I saw you standing up to Patricia Banks on that street, and something inside me woke up. Something I'd been burying for 11 years. What? The belief that someone might actually fight for me. Not for my money, not for my land, for me. Emma's throat tightened. Caleb, I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. And I know you married me because you were desperate, not because you felt anything. I'm not asking you to feel anything. I'm just telling you the truth. Because you asked for the truth, and I promised you'd have it. She stood there, frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every rational thought in her head was screaming at her to step back, to keep the wall up, to protect herself from a man she'd known for less than 3 weeks. But her gut, the same gut her father had told her to trust, was saying something different. I didn't marry you just because I was desperate, she said. Caleb blinked. What? I married you because when you stood at the edge of my yard in the moonlight and told me you needed a wife, you didn't lie. You didn't charm me. You didn't promise me the world. You just told me the truth and let me decide. And in my entire life, no man has ever respected me enough to do that. The room was very quiet. So don't tell me what I feel or don't feel, Emma continued. I'll figure that out on my own. But don't assume you know either, because you might be wrong. Caleb swallowed. Hard. Which direction might I be wrong? Figure it out yourself, Cowboy. I'm not doing all the work in this marriage. And she walked out of the room before he could see the flush rising in her cheeks. She made it to the hallway. She pressed her back against the wall and put her hand over her heart. It was beating so hard it hurt. Get it together, Emma, she whispered. Get it together. But she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. Couldn't stop it, didn't want to, and didn't try. The next morning, Emma wrote a letter. Not to Clara, not to her father. She wrote to a lawyer named James Kincaid in Colorado Springs, a man whose name she'd found in one of Thornton's letters. Thornton had mentioned Kincaid in a dismissive footnote. Unlike my colleague Kincaid, who wastes his talents defending lost causes. Anyone Thornton dismissed was exactly the kind of person Emma wanted on their side. She wrote 3 pages. She laid out the case clearly, professionally, without emotion. She described the original deed, Robert's 11-year campaign, the quiet title action, the notification irregularity, the Briggs affidavit, and the upcoming territorial court challenge. She ended the letter with one line. Mr. Kincaid, my husband has been fighting this battle alone for over a decade. He needs someone who fights as hard as he does. If that's you, name your price. She gave the letter to Sam. Get this to Colorado Springs as fast as you can. That's a 4-day ride, ma'am. And I say, Sam tipped his hat and was gone within the hour. Caleb found her in the study that afternoon. She was rereading Thornton's letters again, looking for weaknesses, looking for patterns, looking for anything she might have missed. Sam told me you wrote to a lawyer, Caleb said. James Kincaid, Colorado Springs. I've never heard of him. Thornton has, and Thornton is afraid of him. Caleb raised an eyebrow. How do you know that? Because people only dismiss their equals. If Kincaid were no threat, Thornton wouldn't have mentioned him at all. Caleb leaned against the door frame and crossed his arms. He watched her for a long moment with an expression she was learning to recognize, a mix of surprise, admiration, and something deeper that he wasn't ready to name. You're running this now, he said. It wasn't a question. We're running this together. You know the land, the history, the people. I know how to fight when your back is against the wall. That's what you married me for, isn't it? A partner? That's what I said. Then let me be one, Tikin. He nodded. What do you need from me? Your grandfather's original documents, the deed, the geological survey, any correspondence with Briggs, anything that proves the deed was legitimate and properly executed. They're in a safe, in the cellar. Show me. He did. The safe was old iron heavy built into the foundation of the house. Caleb knelt in front of it and worked the combination with practiced hands. The door swung open. Inside were stacks of papers, leather-bound ledgers, in a wooden case that Caleb handled with the care of a man touching something sacred. My grandfather's personal records, he said. Everything he built, everything he planned, everything he wanted to protect. Emma knelt beside him. She reached into the safe and pulled out a thick document bound with a red ribbon. The deed, Caleb said. She untied the ribbon and opened it. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, but the writing was clear. Bold, confident, handwriting, the handwriting of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. She read it slowly. Every word, every clause, every signature. And then she stopped. Caleb, what? The deed is witnessed. I know, that's standard. It's witnessed by 2 people, Samuel Briggs and someone named Eleanor Hayes. Caleb went rigid. Eleanor Hayes. Who is Eleanor Hayes? His face changed. Something moved behind his eyes, something old, something painful, something he had locked away so deep she almost couldn't see it. Eleanor Hayes, and he said slowly, is my mother. Emma stared at him. Your mother witnessed the deed. Yes. The mother who left when you were 12. Yes. Caleb, if your mother witnessed the deed, she can testify that it was legitimate. She can counter Briggs's affidavit. She can prove your grandfather wasn't under duress. If she's alive. I don't know, I haven't heard from her in 18 years. Emma sat back on her heels. The cellar was cold and the air was damp, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing faster than it ever had in her life. We need to find her, Emma said. No. Caleb, I said no. His voice was hard, harder than she'd heard it. Hard like iron, like the safe, like the walls he'd built around everything he couldn't bear to feel. She left Emma. She walked out on us. She chose to leave her husband and her son and never look back. I'm not going to go begging for her help. This isn't about begging. This is about saving your land. There has to be another way. There might be, but this is the surest way. Briggs says the deed was coerced. Your mother was there. She saw it signed. Her testimony destroys his. You don't know what you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to do the hardest thing you've ever done, I know that. But I'm asking because there's no other choice. Caleb stood up. He walked to the cellar stairs. He stood with his back to her, his hands braced against the wall, his head bowed. She didn't even say goodbye, he said, and his voice broke on the last word, cracked right down the middle like a bone under too much pressure. Emma stood. She walked to him. She stood close enough to touch, but didn't. I know, she said softly. She just left. One morning she was there, and the next morning she wasn't. My father found a note on the kitchen table. 3 words. I am sorry. Caleb. 3 words. That's all I was worth. 3 words and an empty chair at breakfast. Emma reached out and put her hand on his back. He flinched. Then he didn't move. He stood there, this man who had built walls around his heart for 18 years, and he let a woman he'd known for 3 weeks touch the place where all the pain lived. Finding her doesn't mean forgiving her, Emma said. It means using every weapon we have to protect what your grandfather built, what your father died for, what you've spent your whole life defending. And if she won't help, then at least we tried, and we move on to the next option. He turned around. His eyes were red. He hadn't cried. She could tell he hadn't allowed himself that, but the effort of holding it back was written across every line of his face. You're going to find her, he said. We're going to find her. How? She went east. That's what you said. Your grandfather's lawyer, Briggs, he handled all the family affairs. If anyone knows where Eleanor went, it's him. Briggs is working for Robert. Briggs is being paid by Robert. That doesn't mean he's loyal. A man who can be bought once can be bought twice. Caleb stared at her. You want to buy Briggs? I want to talk to Briggs, and I want to find out exactly how much of his affidavit is real and how much Robert paid for. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, but hiding hasn't worked, Caleb. Running hasn't worked. The only thing left is fighting, and fighting means getting our hands dirty. He looked at her for a long time, this woman who had walked into his life with holes in her boots and fire in her eyes. This woman who had married him for survival and was now standing in his cellar planning a war against his own family with more courage than anyone he'd ever known. All right, he said, we find Briggs, we find my mother, and we end this. Together, they climbed out of the cellar side by side, carrying the deed and the documents and the weight of everything that was coming. Above them, the sky was darkening. A storm was building over the eastern ridge, over the 300 acres that Robert had stolen, over the silver that everyone wanted, over the land that had cost one man his life and was about to cost another man everything he had left. Emma looked at the storm. She didn't flinch. She had survived poverty. She had survived humiliation. She had survived marrying a stranger and discovering that the stranger was hiding a fortune in a war. She could survive this too, because she was a Whitmore, and Whitmores don't break. And somewhere out there, east far away, 18 years gone, a woman named Eleanor Hayes was the key to everything. Emma was going to find her, no matter what it cost. Kincaid's reply arrived 9 days later. Sam rode in with the letter at dusk, his horse foaming, his face unreadable. He handed the envelope directly to Emma without a word. She tore it open, standing in the yard with Caleb 2 steps behind her. She read the first line and her hands started shaking. What does it say? Caleb asked. He's coming. Kincaid is coming here, personally. She read further. He says he's been waiting for someone to challenge Garrett Thornton for years. He calls this case. She stopped, read it again, looked up at Caleb. He calls this case the most clear-cut example of legal theft he's ever seen. When does he arrive? 10 days. That's cutting it close. Robert's deadline is in 41 days. Kincaid knows. He says he's already filed a preliminary motion to stay the quiet title action pending review. That buys us time. Caleb grabbed her arm. Not hard, not rough, just grabbed it like a drowning man finding something solid. He filed already before even meeting us. He read my letter and he filed the same day. Emma looked at Caleb's hand on her arm. He let go quickly, stepping back. But something had passed between them in that grip. Something electric and unspoken that neither of them acknowledged. There's more, Emma said. He found Briggs. Caleb went still. Where? A boarding house in Pueblo. Briggs has been living there for 2 years under a different name. Kincaid's investigator tracked him through county tax records. Is he still working for Robert? Kincaid doesn't think so. He thinks Briggs signed the affidavit, took the money, and ran. He thinks Briggs is scared. Scared of Robert. Scared of what he did. Scared of the lie. Caleb turned away. His jaw was working, the muscles jumping beneath the skin. I want to talk to him myself. No, Kincaid says we don't approach Briggs directly. Not yet. If Robert finds out we know where he is, he'll move Briggs or silence him. We wait. We let Kincaid handle it legally. I'm tired of waiting, Emma. And I'm tired of you acting like patience is weakness. It's not. It's strategy. He spun back toward her. For a second, just a second, she thought he was going to argue. His eyes were hot, his fists were clenched, and every line of his body was pulled tight like a bowstring. Then he exhaled, long, slow, controlled. Fine, he said. We wait. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just be right. I usually am. That almost smile again. Closer to real every time. 7 days before Kincaid's arrival, Marcus came back. This time he didn't come alone. He brought 3 men, hard-faced, broad-shouldered men who sat on their horses like they were used to intimidating people from the saddle. Emma saw them first. She was in the study reviewing the geological survey when the sound of hooves reached her. She went to the window and her stomach clenched. She found Caleb in the barn. Marcus is here. He brought muscle. Caleb's expression didn't change. He reached for the revolver hanging on the wall post. He checked the chambers, snapped it shut, and slid it into his holster. Stay inside, he said. No. Emma. I said no. If I hide inside, they'll think I'm afraid. And if they think I'm afraid, they'll know they can use me against you. Caleb looked at her. She could see the war in his eyes, the need to protect her, fighting against the knowledge that she was right. Stay behind me, he said, beside you. He shook his head, but he didn't argue. They walked out together. Marcus was already dismounting. He handed his reins to one of his men and straightened his coat with the casual arrogance of someone who believed he owned every room he entered. Cousin, Marcus said, I see you've settled in nicely with your new bride. You've got 30 seconds to tell me why you're here, Marcus. Then you leave. Always so hostile. You know, Caleb, this would all be so much easier if you just cooperate. 25 seconds. Marcus sighed theatrically. He pulled a folded document from his coat and held it out. Uncle Robert is offering you a final deal. Sign over the Eastern Ridge, formally, legally, no contest. In exchange, he drops all claims on the rest of the property. You keep the house, the cattle, the western lands. He gets the ridge. And the silver, Emma said. Marcus's eyes snapped to her. Excuse me. The silver deposits on the Eastern Ridge. That's what Robert wants. Let's not pretend this is about family or fairness. It's about the silver. Marcus's smile disappeared. He looked at Caleb. You told her. She figured it out. She's smarter than all of you combined. Marcus studied Emma with new eyes. Not the dismissive once-over he'd given her before. This time he looked at her the way a man looks at something he's just realized is dangerous. Mrs. Hayes, Marcus said slowly, I'd be very careful about you getting involved in family business you don't understand. I understand it perfectly. Robert stole 300 acres through an improperly served quiet title action. He obtained a fraudulent affidavit from a lawyer he bribed, and he's trying to bully my husband into surrendering millions in mineral rights for pennies. Emma stepped forward. I grew up negotiating with men who thought they could cheat my family out of everything we owned. You don't scare me, Marcus, and neither does Robert. Marcus's jaw tightened. He turned back to Caleb. Control your wife. I wouldn't try if I could. This is a mistake, Caleb. Uncle Robert is done being patient. Then tell Uncle Robert to come here himself. Tell him to stop sending boys to do a man's job. Marcus flushed red. His hand twitched toward his hip instinct, threat or both. Caleb's hand was already on his revolver. Don't, Caleb said quietly. Just don't. Marcus held his stare for 3 seconds. She did 7. Then he backed down. He turned, took his reins from his man, and mounted his horse. 60 days, Marcus said. That's all you have left. 41, Emma corrected. But who's counting? Marcus looked at her one last time. Something flickered behind his eyes, not anger, not contempt. Recognition, the recognition of a man who just realized he's been outmatched and doesn't want to admit it. He rode out without another word. When the hoofbeats faded, Caleb turned to Emma. His hand was still on his revolver. His breathing was steady, but she could see the pulse hammering in his neck. You shouldn't have provoked him, he said. He needed to know we're not afraid. We should be afraid. Maybe, but they don't need to know that. Caleb shook his head. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed. Not the short, rough laugh she'd heard of before. A real laugh. Full and deep and broken open, like something that had been caged for years finally finding daylight. What? Emma said. He pressed his hand to his forehead, still laughing. I spent 11 years hiding from these people. Building walls, keeping secrets, living alone in the mountains like a ghost. And then you show up, you with your holes in your boots and your stack of conditions, and in 3 weeks you've done more damage to Robert Hayes than I did in a decade. I haven't done anything yet. You've done everything. His laughter faded, but the warmth stayed. You changed everything, Emma. She looked at him. The afternoon light was in his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't see walls. She didn't see armor. She just saw him. A man who was tired of being alone. A man who had married a stranger and found something he'd stopped believing existed. Caleb, she said. Yes. When you asked me by the fire to tell you one true thing, and you said you were afraid of disappointing me, did you mean it? Every word. Then hear this. You haven't disappointed me. Not once. Not when you hid the truth about the valley. Not when you couldn't tell me about your mother. Not even when you refused to open your mail for 11 years, which, by the way, we are never doing again. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and lived there. Noted, he said, but I need you to hear the rest of it too. She took a breath. I didn't marry you for love. You know that. I married you because I was drowning, and you were the only hand reaching down. But somewhere between reading 93 letters and standing in your cellar and facing down your cousin in the yard, somewhere in all of that, something changed. Caleb's smile faded, not because he was unhappy, because what she was saying was too important for smiling. I'm not ready to call it love, Emma said. I don't know if it is, but I know that when Marcus looked at you today and you looked back without flinching, my heart nearly came out of my chest. And I know that when you told me you were afraid of disappointing me, it was the bravest thing I've ever heard a man say. And I know that I stopped wanting to run about a week ago, and I haven't wanted to since. Emma, I'm not done. She held up her hand. I need you to know that whatever happens with Robert, with the court, with the silver, with all of it, I'm here. Not because you paid my father's debt, not because you gave me a home, because you gave me something nobody else ever did. What a choice. You let me choose, and I chose you. The yard was quiet. The workers had gone still again. They always did when something important passed between these two, and the only sound was wind through the valley and the distant lowing of cattle. Caleb stepped toward her, close, closer than he'd ever stood, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the solid weight of his presence, the careful restraint of a man who wanted to reach out but wouldn't unless she reached first. She reached. She put her hand on his chest right over his heart. She could feel it pounding hard, fast, desperate, the heartbeat of a man who had been alone so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be chosen. Emma, he said, and his voice was rough, cracked, barely held together. I have been standing in this valley for 11 years waiting for someone. I didn't know who. I didn't know when. I just knew that if I kept standing long enough, someone would come who could see past the walls and the money and the fear and find the man underneath. And did I? You found him the first night, by the fire, when you asked me to tell you one true thing. He put his hand over hers, over his heart, and held it there. You found him, and he's yours, if you'll have him. Emma looked up at him. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Whitmores don't break. But maybe she thought maybe breaking wasn't the right word. Maybe this was something else. Maybe this was opening. I'll have him, she said. And Caleb Hayes, the hidden billionaire, the lonely cowboy, the man who had been waiting his entire adult life for someone who wanted nothing from him, but him, leaned down and kissed his wife for the first time. It wasn't a long kiss. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft and careful and full of something neither of them had words for yet. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. He blinked it away fast. Old habits die hard, but she saw it. She saw everything. We've got a war to fight, she whispered. I know. Kincaid arrives in 3 days. I know. And Robert is coming after that. I know. So we don't have time to stand here staring at each other like two idiots in a penny novel. Caleb laughed again. That real laugh, the one she was starting to live for. No, ma'am, he said. We do not. They walked back toward the house side by side, not touching, but close. Close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed with every step. And for the first time since she'd ridden into this valley, Emma didn't feel like a desperate woman who had traded her freedom for survival. She felt like a partner. She felt like a wife. She felt like the woman who was going to save Caleb Hayes from his own family, even if it meant burning every bridge and breaking every rule and standing in front of a territorial judge and daring him to look her in the eye. Robert Hayes had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out. Kincaid arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding a rented horse and carrying a leather case stuffed with enough legal documents to bury a courthouse. He was younger than Emma expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes, a clean jaw, and the calm confidence of a man who had walked into hostile courtrooms and walked out victorious more times than he could count. He shook Caleb's hand, then he shook Emma's. Then he looked between them and said, "Which one of you wrote that letter?" "I did," Emma said. "Then you're the one I need to talk to first." They sat at the table, Emma, Caleb, Kincaid, and Emma laid out everything. The deed, the boundary dispute, the quiet title action, the Denver Post notification, Briggs, the affidavit, Eleanor, the silver. Kincaid listened without interrupting. He made no notes. He asked no questions until she finished. Then he leaned back and said, "The notification argument alone will vacate the quiet title. I can have that done in 2 weeks. And Robert's bigger claim, the territorial court. That depends on Briggs. If we can get Briggs to recant his affidavit, or better yet, testify that Robert paid him to lie, the entire case collapses. And if Briggs won't recant, then we need Eleanor Hayes." Caleb's jaw tightened. Emma put her hand on his knee under the table. He didn't flinch this time. "We'll get Eleanor," Emma said, "one way or another." Kincaid studied her. "Mrs. Hayes, I've been practicing law for 15 years. I've had clients worth 10 times what your husband is worth. And not one of them ever handed me a case this well prepared on the first meeting. I had 93 letters and 4 sleepless nights. That's not talent, that's desperation." "No, ma'am, that's exactly what talent looks like." Kincaid rode for Pueblo the next morning to find Briggs. He told them to wait. He told them not to contact anyone. He told them to stay quiet and stay ready. Emma hated waiting. She'd spent her whole life waiting, waiting for the bills to stop, waiting for her father to get better, waiting for someone to throw her a rope. She was done waiting. But she trusted Kincaid, and she trusted the plan. So she waited. 5 days later, Kincaid sent word through a rider. 2 sentences. "Briggs will talk, bringing him to you." Emma read the note to Caleb. He sat down hard like his legs had given out. "He'll talk," Caleb repeated. "That's what it says. What if he's lying? What if Robert got to him first? Then Kincaid would know. He's not a fool, Caleb. Neither is Robert. Robert has money and lawyers. We have the truth, and right now the truth is winning." Kincaid arrived 6 days later with Samuel Briggs in tow. Briggs was old, 70 at least. He walked with a cane, and his hands trembled and his eyes darted around the valley like a man expecting to be ambushed. When he saw Caleb, he stopped dead. "You look like your grandfather," Briggs said. His voice was thin, papery, worn down by years and guilt. "Sit down, Mr. Briggs," Emma said. They sat. Kincaid stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. "Tell us the truth," Emma said. "All of it, starting with the affidavit." Briggs looked at his hands. They were shaking badly. "Robert Hayes came to me 2 years ago. He found me in Pueblo. I thought I'd hidden well enough, but he found me." He swallowed. "He offered me $5,000 to sign an affidavit saying William Hayes was under duress when the deed was drafted." "And was he under duress?" Emma asked. "No." Briggs looked up. His eyes were wet. "William Hayes was the most clear-headed man I ever knew. He drafted that deed because he didn't trust his own son to protect the land from Robert. He loved Thomas. Lord, he loved that boy, but he knew Thomas was weak, too trusting, too kind. So he bypassed Thomas and gave it to Caleb," Emma said. "He gave it to the future. That's what he told me. I'm not giving this to a boy, Samuel. I'm giving it to the man that boy will become." Caleb's hands were flat on the table. His knuckles were white. "Why did you sign the affidavit?" Caleb asked. His voice was controlled, but barely. If you knew the deed was legitimate, why did you lie? Briggs closed his eyes. It's because I was old and broke and scared. Robert didn't just offer money. He threatened me, said if I didn't sign, he'd make sure I never practiced law again, said he'd ruin what was left of my reputation. So you sold my grandfather's legacy for $5,000 and a threat. Yes, a tear rolled down Briggs's weathered cheek. And I've hated myself every day since. Will you recant? Emma asked, in front of a judge, under oath. Will you tell the truth? Briggs looked at Caleb. I owe your grandfather that much. I owe you that much. Yes, I'll recant. Kincaid stepped forward. I'll need a sworn statement today, and I'll need you in court when the time comes. I'll be there, Briggs said. Whatever it costs me, I'll be there. Emma looked at Caleb. His eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something fiercer. Relief, vindication. The feeling of a tide finally turning after 11 years of holding ground. But they weren't done yet. There's still Eleanor, Emma said quietly. Caleb nodded. He turned to Briggs. My mother, you handled all of my grandfather's affairs. Do you know where she went? Briggs hesitated. I do. The room went silent. You knew, Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. All this time you knew where she was. She contacted me once, about a year after she left. She wanted to know if William's estate was settled, if you were taken care of. And you didn't tell me. She asked me not to. She said she didn't deserve to be part of your life. She said she'd only cause more pain. Caleb stood up. His chair fell backward. Where is she? St. Louis. Last I knew, she was working as a seamstress under her maiden name, Eleanor Dawson. Caleb turned to Emma. His face was a battlefield rage and grief and hope, all fighting for the same ground. I'll go, Emma said. No, we go together. Caleb, you can't leave the valley, not with Robert's deadline. I said together, Emma. She saw it in his eyes. This wasn't about strategy. This wasn't about the case. This was an 18-year wound that had never closed, and the only way it would heal was if he walked through the door himself. Together, they left Sam in charge of the valley. Kincaid stayed behind to prepare the legal filings. Emma and Caleb rode for the nearest rail station and boarded a train east. They didn't speak much on the journey. Caleb sat by the window with his hat in his hands, turning it over and over, his eyes focused on something far beyond the passing landscape. Emma sat beside him close enough that their arms touched. She didn't push. She didn't ask questions. She just stayed. They found Eleanor Dawson in a narrow boarding house on the south side of St. Louis. Emma knocked. Caleb stood behind her, rigid as a fence post, his breathing shallow. The door opened. Eleanor Hayes was 53 years old. Her hair was gray. Her hands were rough from years of needlework. And when she saw the man standing behind Emma, she grabbed the door frame like the floor had dropped out beneath her. Caleb, she breathed. Hello, Mother. Eleanor's face crumpled, not slowly, all at once, like a dam breaking. She pressed her hand to her mouth, and the sound that came out was something between a cry and a prayer. I thought you'd never come, she whispered. I almost didn't. Emma stepped aside. This was not her moment. This was between a mother and a son, separated by 18 years of silence and guilt in a 3-word note on a kitchen table. Can we come in? Emma asked gently. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. They sat in her small room, 2 chairs and a bed, that was all, and Eleanor told her story. She spoke through tears, through silences, through the kind of pain that doesn't fade with time, but only burrows deeper. She had left because the fighting between Thomas and Robert was destroying everything. She had begged Thomas to walk away, to take Caleb and start over somewhere else. He refused. He said the land was his responsibility. I couldn't watch him die, Eleanor said. I knew it was killing him. The stress, the betrayal, his own brother tearing him apart. I told him if he didn't leave, I would. And he didn't leave, Caleb said. And I did. The worst decision I ever made, and the one I've paid for every single day since. You could have come back and done what your father was gone within 6 years. By then you'd inherited everything and disappeared into the mountains. I didn't know how to find you. I didn't know if you'd even want me to. I was 18 years old and I found my father dead in his chair. I needed my mother. Eleanor broke completely. She sobbed raw, ugly, uncontrolled, the sobs of a woman confronting the full weight of what she had abandoned. Emma watched Caleb. His face was stone. His eyes were dry. Every muscle in his body was locked down, holding back the flood. Then Eleanor said something that shattered him. You were the only good thing I ever did, Caleb. The only thing I'm proud of. And I was too broken to stay and watch you grow into the man I always knew you'd become. Caleb's stone cracked, his eyes filled. He pressed his fist against his mouth, and for one terrible, beautiful moment, the walls came down. All of them. Every wall he'd built since he was 12 years old. Emma reached over and took his hand. He gripped it so tight her fingers went white. I didn't come here to forgive you, he said, his voice ragged. I came because I need your help. Anything. Robert is trying to take the land, grandfather's land. He has a lawyer claiming the deed was forged. You witnessed that deed. You were there when grandfather signed it. I remember. I need you to testify in court, under oath, that William Hayes was sound of mind and signed that deed of his own free will. Eleanor wiped her eyes. She straightened in her chair. And for the first time since the door opened, Emma saw something in this woman that reminded her of Caleb, a core of steel buried beneath years of grief. I'll testify, Eleanor said, and I'll tell them the truth. Your grandfather sat at that table and signed the deed and looked at me and said, Eleanor, this is for the boy. Make sure the boy gets it. Promise me. And I promised. And now you'll keep that promise, Emma said. Yes, I will. They brought Eleanor back to the valley. She rode the train west without complaint, without hesitation, without looking back at the city where she'd hidden for 18 years. When she saw the valley for the first time, the land her father-in-law had built the empire, her son had defended, she put her hand over her heart and whispered, he did it, the old man did it. The territorial court hearing took place 26 days later. Robert Hayes arrived with Garrett Thornton and a team of 3 associate lawyers and Marcus and 2 men who looked more like bodyguards than witnesses. Caleb arrived with Emma Kincaid, Samuel Briggs, and Eleanor Hayes. Robert saw Eleanor and went pale. He grabbed Thornton's arm and whispered something urgent. Thornton's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Kincaid dismantled the quiet title action in 40 minutes. The Denver Post notification was ruled improper. The 312 acres reverted to Caleb Hayes immediately. Then Briggs took the stand. He recanted his affidavit. He testified that Robert had paid him $5,000 to lie. He testified that William Hayes was the sharpest, most deliberate man he had ever known, and that the deed was drafted with full knowledge and consent. Thornton cross-examined him aggressively. Briggs held firm. Every question, Thornton threw the old man batted away with the quiet certainty of a man telling the truth for the first time in years. Then Eleanor took the stand. She looked at the judge. She looked at Robert, the brother-in-law who had destroyed her husband and driven her from her home. And she told the truth. William Hayes signed that deed in my presence. He was clear. He was calm. He knew exactly what he was doing. He looked at me and said, this is for the boy. And I gave him my word. And you're keeping that word now? Kincaid asked. I'm keeping it now. Robert stood up. His face was purple. This is a circus. She abandoned her own family. She has no credibility. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, the judge said, or I will hold you in contempt. Robert sat. The judge ruled in Caleb's favor on every count. The deed was upheld. The quiet title was vacated. Robert's claims were dismissed with prejudice, meaning he could never file them again. It was over. 11 years of war ended in a single afternoon. Outside the courthouse, Robert stopped Caleb on the steps. His face was ashen. His hands were shaking. This isn't finished, Robert said. Caleb looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, with something closer to pity. Yes, it is, Caleb said. It's been finished since the day grandfather signed that deed. You just couldn't accept it. He turned and walked away. Emma was waiting at the bottom of the steps. She looked up at him as he came down, this man she had married out of desperation and grown to love through fire, and she smiled. How does it feel, she asked, like breathing for the first time in 11 years. Good, because we have a ranch to run, a family to rebuild, and about 800 cattle that need counting. 782. Sam counted last week. It's 791 now. Caleb laughed. That full, real, broken open laugh that she had pulled out of him piece by piece over the hardest weeks of both their lives. They rode home together. Eleanor rode with them, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as family. The road was long. The silence between them was comfortable now. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling because everything important has already been said. 6 months later, Clara came to visit the valley. She brought a letter from Henry Whitmore, handwritten, shaky, but legible, that said simply, "I always knew you'd find your way, Emma Rose. Your mother would be proud. So am I." Emma read it, sitting on the porch of the home she now shared with her husband. She pressed the letter to her chest the same way she'd pressed that foreclosure receipt so many months ago. But this time she wasn't sliding to the floor in relief. She was standing, tall, steady, whole. Because Emma Whitmore, the desperate girl who married a stranger with nothing, had done something nobody in that dusty little town ever expected. She had seen the man when everyone else only saw the mountain. She had chosen the person when everyone else would have chased the fortune. And in doing so, she didn't just save a ranch or win a court battle or uncover a hidden empire. She gave a lonely man the one thing his money could never buy, someone who loved him for nothing at all. And that was worth more than every acre, every silver deposit, and every dollar in the entire territory combined. Because real wealth was never about what you own, it was always about who stays.